Welcome back to Bitcoin for Merchants, an original Coin Academy course. We are on lesson 2, understanding the risks. So let's go ahead and get started with this lesson. The first issue that I want to talk about is clearance times. Now, Bitcoin transactions are processed in groups. Typically, it takes 10 minutes to verify and add a group of transactions to the blockchain. Now, while there have been no reports of double spending problems, the system is really very, very robust. If you want to look at this from a purely hypothetical point of view and you want to be extremely risk averse, the way to think about it is this way. The transactions at the end of the blockchain are most at risk. In other words, the most recent group of transactions. Therefore, if you really want to play it safe, you can wait 2 or 3 confirmation cycles before you consider a transaction final. This means waiting 20 or 30 minutes for considering a transaction to be final. If you're involving a very large sum, caution says wait 6 confirmations, 60 minutes. But again, I reiterate, there have actually been no reported incidents of transactions being reversed due to fraud, double spending issues, or due to bad verifications in the blockchain. So the risk on this is extremely marginal. That said, there is a solution. If you want, use a merchant service that provides instant confirmation and sidesteps this entire issue. Another issue that is very much a real-world issue is Bitcoin exchange rate risk. Now, admittedly, this is no different than dealing with any sort of foreign currency exchange, and that's really the way to think about it. But Bitcoin is more volatile than traditional currencies. If you have a narrow margin business, this may be an issue of concern for you. You certainly don't want to be in a situation where you are holding Bitcoin if you're absolutely essential on having national cash for your operations. Some payment processors, however, including BitPay, Coinbase, BIPs, and a number of others, offer immediate conversion to national currency if you're using their system. There is another issue here, and it is that it can create pricing headaches. You have a price of X for your product. You know that right now in Bitcoin that equals Y. Well, 20 minutes from now, much less 3 days from now, it may equal Z. Solution for this: use a merchant service that offers real-time rate conversion for your prices of your goods and offers instant settlement in national currency. In other words, you're pushing the risk back on the merchant and you're using their technology to avoid pricing headaches. Bitcoin fraud. This is really an emerging area. You know, the fraudsters are always looking for a new way to make money, and of course they see Bitcoin starting to emerge as a payment paradigm, and they're headed that way too. At this point in time, there have been few reported incidents, but 2 schemes have emerged that you should be aware of. The first is QR code fraud, and this is actually a physical fraud exercise. Basically, the fraudster will create a sticker that looks like your sticker, but it has their QR code on it. Then they will find a way that they can paste their sticker on top of your QR code. So when the buyer takes a snap of that QR code to process a transaction, the buyer sees the transaction clear and they see the Bitcoin leave their account, but you as the seller, you never receive the Bitcoin. The transaction never clears for you. That's because the Bitcoin's gone off to the fraudster's account, not to yours. This is really easy to protect against. You basically need to do 2 things. Number 1, you need to protect your QR codes. You know, don't put them on the back of your menus, for example. That's ripe for fraud. You'd constantly have to check your menus to make sure nobody had stickered them. And second, always wait for the transactions to clear before you release the buyer or you release the goods. The second fraud scheme that we've seen is an invoice by mail fraud scheme. The way this works is the fraudster will send out invoices to your customers. This is typically done by a spammer. They'll blast it to everybody. And it announces that your firm now accepts Bitcoin, and they include a Bitcoin address in the invoice telling people you can pay right now. Use this QR code. But of course that Bitcoin address is not yours. Well, the solution to this: never embed your address in invoices. If you're going to implement Bitcoin payment, do it quickly, notify your people, notify your customers, but don't put the address, the QR code, in the invoice. Rather, give them a link they can click that takes them to your website and put the code on an SSL-enabled page. This is your best solution for protecting against this sort of fraud. So it is really a manageable risk. Both of these fraud schemes are. I'm sure other fraud schemes will emerge in the future, but right now these are the 2 that we're aware of. What are the indirect costs of accepting Bitcoin for your business or implementing Bitcoin for sales? Well, first, staff training, of course. Second, there is a potential for longer transaction times depending on the methodology that you use. Third, customer education. Your staff is going to have to spend a little bit of time with the customer, certainly with some of the customers, helping them process the transaction or understand what it can do or answering questions about the system. Next, you will have accounting process adjustments you have to make. So you do need to speak with your accounting team and have that system in place so that you can start handling these transactions when they begin. And there is, of course, additional account management overhead because now you have a new account, the Bitcoin wallet, and you need to get funds in and out of that account. That's it for this lesson. Join us in Lesson 3 when we look at how to accept Bitcoin, both in terms of manual transaction process and we're going to look at an example of implementing a Bitcoin point of sale system. Thank you very much.